Well, here we are. It's Tuesday morning, January 21. It's 9:11 a.m. I'm 4 minutes early from my 9:15 start time. And happy to be here. I was basically up all night watching. My God, I never watched so much TV continuously. I think it's I started watching the pre-inauguration stuff. You know, inauguration was at noon yesterday, and I was locked in to watching, the pre-show starting at 11. So at 11, I turned on trusty old Fox News. The only place where you get fair and balanced, that's for sure. And, got all warmed up. And it was amazing. All the pre-stuff and the introduction of this person and that person. And, oh boy. And then, what do you know, at noon, I mean, you could almost set your watch with it, he was standing there with the Chief Justice of Roberts of the United States Supreme Court, with hand raised, and he took the oath of office. And that was so, like 12, at 12:10, actually before then, he became the 47th president of the United States. And all that inaugural priority stuff is unbelievable. So after you watch or witness the inauguration, then Robin, our daughter Robin, used to work for Clay Shaw. She was right at the front door with her now best friend, whose name shall be unmentioned because she's enjoying a private life, I believe in California somewhere. And anyway, Robin was right at the front door and handled, events and planning and parts of Clay Shaw's calendar. So you had two real good-looking young ladies in their 20s, late 20s, right at the front door when you open up the front door. And Clay Shaw was an 18-year congressman, 9 terms, I believe. And when you go in his office, and sit down at the guest chair on the proper side of the desk, and Representative Clay Shaw would sit, in his seat, and right in his huge picture window is a picture of the Capitol. Oh my God! I mean, it's got to be in the heart office building. Yeah. And if you're going to go to the Capitol from the Hart office building, is you take the elevator, I believe one level below the ground level, and you catch, like a little subway train with open cars. It's almost like a tram ride on Disney. And it's self-propelled. It stops. It waits for, 6 or 8 people to get in this little car thing. And there, 4 or 5 cars or 2 or 3 cars on the train. And it takes you underground directly to the Capitol. And then you get out of this little tram ride thing, and you go up a few elevator levels, and there you are in the Capitol. Between and I forget where it lets you off. But there's a series of elevators and escalators. You have your choice whether you want an elevator up or escalator up, I believe. Yep. But Clay Shaw picture window looks directly at the Capitol building, which is a beautiful sight to see, So, anyway, Robin would organize trips for dignitaries in certain areas of Clay Shaw's constituency, and Boca Raton was in Clay Shaw's constituency, and we were invited to travel to Washington and take a tour. So I believe there were like 38 or 40 of us, important citizens from Boca Raton. Well, the only importance I was, Marilyn and I, is parents to Robin. Everyone else, on that tour, husbands and wives, it was, they owned major businesses, in Southern Palm Beach County. Major donors, I think, friends of the family of Clay Shaw, so forth. So we went up, and she took us to her office, her desk in Clay Shaw's office. And I don't know if I don't think Clay Shaw was there the first time we saw. So Robin introduced us around and went in, and Mary Kay McClure, looked at us and heard that Robin's parents were coming, so she waves me in to her office, which is like straight ahead if you keep walking in the front door of their suite, which had 4 or 5 offices. And if you look over to the left, that's where Robin's desk was. And if you look over to the right, there was another desk. And the young lady handled, all the mail, and I think handled Clay Shaw's calendar, booking appointments and that kind of thing. Robin handled the front door and the mail. And then I don't know what she did, but she was busy. Anyway, Mary Kay McClure waved me into her office, which is like an open office, like the door is always open. So she waved me in. She caught my eye, waved me in, and I said, "Well, I'm really delighted that you all hired Robin. She really loves being in Clay Shaw's office, with all this stuff directly out of her 4-year college degree." And she said, "Oh, Mr. Wilson, you wouldn't believe." Robin walked in the front door, and she had a deep blue suit on with a white blouse and had a flag silk scarf wrapped around her neck and tucked into her shirt somehow. And, so she was red, white, and blue. She said as long as she could speak the English language, she was hired. She was like, She made some kind of remark like that. And of course, she's a lot more than that, but my God, what a stunning way to show up for an interview. So that was Robin's, or Mary Kay McClure's recital on how Robin got hired. I'm looking at a little delayed broadcast up in this corner right here, and Vice President Vance holds a swearing-in ceremony of the Honorable Marco Rubio. He was our senator, and his main office was in Miami because he was, born and raised in Miami, and somehow or other aspired to being a senator of the third largest state in the Union, which I think then was the fourth largest state. Anyway, so Vance is giving a little talk. Vance is when you've been a senator, and then you've been, and he's a 2-year senator of Ohio. There you go. Raise your hand, put your hand on the Bible, and repeat after me. I, Marco Rubio. Yeah. So, of course, everybody was campaigning for Trump, during his campaign. And Marco, was a senator all during the campaign thing. And then, Marco was appointed to be Secretary of State. That's a huge position. So help me God. Shakes the hand. They give each other a hug. And everyone hugs everybody. Marco and his. So there, Marco Rubio gets in front of the microphone and is now officially Secretary of State. I mean, that is a huge job. He walks into a building, with like 10,000 people in the building. And I think if you look at his entire payroll in the Secretary of State, I mean, it might be 200,000 or 300,000 people, because all the embassies all over the world report into the State Department. So Marco Rubio is the head dog in the State Department. We just got our... Do I have the package here? No. The folder is in the dining room where I'm going through a mountain of mail. We just got our passports renewed. And they got renewed in record time. We sent in our passports whenever and got them back, we have a delivery. They'll send it up. Yeah, they'll send it up. He was trying to... The front desk downstairs was trying to call me, but I didn't want to break away from this exciting conversation with Rubio, Secretary of State. But that is a big job. I hate to even say this, but, in the line of succession to the presidency, if something, heaven forbid, should happen to Trump, although he's already been shot at several times, well, shot at once and with a high-power rifle in the bushes with a guy as he was coming around on the 6th tee of the golf course that he owns in Dade County. And he was hiding in the bushes for 11 hours, since like midnight. with a loaded, with a loaded NATO rifle. 7.62, I think, millimeter projectile with a pretty sizable, blast of gunpowder, and that throws that bullet out of the rifle at about 3,200 feet per second. Twice the speed of sound. And when that bullet goes, it whistles by. You don't want to hear that sound. But he was actually shot at 8 times. There were 8 empty casings on the roof of that building, because they automatically, fly out of the chamber of the rifle, and when a new live round is inserted in the chamber, ready for the next shot. So he was able to pull off 8 rounds. One of them clipped Trump in the ear, on the side of the ear, ripped off the top of his ear. And 7 other rounds, went around his head, and, some low, some high, whatever. I mean, he got hit by one. And, of course, he had enough presence of mind to, go down. So he immediately went down. And, that's the end of the swearing-in ceremony of Marco Rubio. That's quick. Yeah, it takes like 5 minutes. The swearing-in part, even what we witnessed yesterday, watching, our big screen TV, which is really nice, because it not projects, the images that you see on the big screen TV. It's a big Samsung 85-inch diagonal screen. It was, we put it up 2 or 3 years ago. Bought it from Best Buy. It had, their Geek Squad install it. So we bought the TV for like $1,800. The Geek Squad, had delivery of it because they brought it in their truck. So when you have an 85-inch TV, which is 7 foot wide and 4.5 feet tall, so the box with the styrofoam is bigger than that, right? And it's a huge box. So the two of them walked in with this big box, at 10 or 12 in the afternoon. And they, measured it out and this and that. And I stood with one of the guys and I said, well, I want the top edge of that TV to be no more than 14 inches off the ceiling. So you measure your tape measure, 14 inches from the ceiling, and put a dot there, right in the middle of this wall. And, that'll be the top of the screen. And then you can measure down from the TV on where your bracket needs to be positioned, and they screw that into, they use a magnetic device, I believe, or it was an app, on the iPhone, I forget which. I think it was a little box thing, almost like a compass, and it'll show you where the metal studs are, if they're metal studs. And of course, and they usually are in a modern building. They don't use 2x6s. And he said, no. So he kept on moving I said 14 inches from the ceiling. Is there any part of that you don't understand? He said, well, Mr. Wilson, that's pretty high. I said, I know, but that's exactly where I want it, because you see this half a bookcase, from the ground up, like a half a baker's rack. That chest is going to go under the TV, and then Marilyn is going to put some knicky-knackies on top, and I don't want them interfacing or interfering with the view of the screen. So she'll have about 14 inches high to put her knickknacks. Nothing over 14 inches, because then it would interfere with viewing the screen. He said, oh, I understand. She said, well, that's awful. I kept on going back. Oh, it's awful high. I said, well, it's an awful big TV. But do what I said. I've used artificial intelligence, with the iPad, and I stood behind this couch and did the 85-inch diagonal bit with the Apple Intelligence, and it drew a picture of the TV, on the wall in this viewing that you're looking at the iPad, and you can see exactly how you want that size TV mounted on the wall. And that's what, so I did that, and then I measured from the top of the screen to the ceiling, and it's 12 to 14 inches. I said, so that's where we want it. Okay? He said, all right. Like, are you sure? I am positive. Well, 12 to 14 inches. He went 14 inches. He couldn't stand putting it 12 inches from the ceiling. I mean, this guy installs a lot of these TVs. He said, that's the highest I've ever... I said, well, when you get it all, attached, I'll show you, what it's going to look like from this couch. And, this bracket that you're installing has the ability so that I can tilt the screen down 3 or 4 degrees, 5 degrees, so when you look at the TV, you're looking square straight at it. So my line of sight is at a tangent line with the face of the TV. He said, I understand. So he sat on the couch after it all got installed, and he said, Mr. Wilson, you're right. 12 to 14 inches is the perfect height for this television. I said, I know. I told you. That was the dialogue while he's installing these things. It was a pretty fast installation. This guy, the other guy he had with him was a younger guy, and wasn't quite as talented, but you hang around the head guy of the pair that walked in the apartment. After watching him install them 10 times or so, this guy his helper would be qualified to, have his own truck in theory if they were to expand, their technology people. I forget what you call them. There's a nickname for what you call them. Anyway, I mean, the screen is perfect. It fills the wall with a nice, bit of, it's just perfectly positioned on the wall, so that when you're sitting in the seating around, the area that's facing this TV, which we have a room that has like a great room and and a dining room combined as to one room, without walls between, which is exactly the way we want it, and it has, big sliding glass picture windows, facing east on our apartment. So we have a 20-foot balcony. The glass is like 20 feet worth of glass. These two sets of sliding glass doors opening up to the balcony. So when it gets, chilly, like January is starting to get chilly here. Outside temperature here is 67 degrees. It's cloudy, rainy. It's going to be rainy all day. This big front that's moving across the country, it's like 5 or 10 degrees in the Washington D.C. area. So they were smart, to move it in to the rotunda, which they had the seating arranged so there were 800 people. I mean, that's a lot of people. All these gold tickets, they call them, special tickets. Congressmen, senators, big donors. They were all handpicked, by the transition team to have tickets to be able to get into the rotunda. They jammed everybody in there, got it all squared away, and the really higher ups, like the Supreme Court, they walked in like a small train. They just waddled in and got into their select seats. Every seat was had your name on it. So they would line up people at the front door and going back or sideways to the front door in the building. 100 feet or so on a long corridor. They'd basically get you lined up, so the next tranche of people would then enter, the rotunda, and the ushers would, get you right to your seats. And they staged everybody like that in this indoor, 120 foot corridor, and they'd have 20, 30 people lined up. They'd kind of check off the names on this master list that they had and the seating arrangement. And if you were a lower level dignitary, you were kind of like in the back, furthest away from the podium, which isn't that far. It's probably 30 steps, 100 feet from the podium. So even the nosebleed seats were close enough to get a good view where you can see the president's hand raised. And I don't think the Constitution says you have to have your hand on a Bible. I don't think it actually declares that, but you have to have your hand up. Yeah. Please raise your right hand and repeat after me. Words right out of the U.S. Constitution. And then the oath of office, which is also in the Constitution. The Supreme Court Judge Roberts reads off 4 or 5 word segments of the swearing in, and then President-elect Trump would repeat after him, and they'd go through the oath segment by segment. Not too many words, because you don't want the person being sworn in to forget any words. You throw out too many words and there's so much stuff going through your mind, you don't want to have a memory quiz in front of 80 million people. Maybe only 1,000 witnesses directly seeing that, and then you had 80 million people in the television audience. Okay, Instacart has delivered my order, so it's out by my front door. Hopefully they delivered it to the right place. Yeah, I'm not worried about anyone walking off with my stuff, so I'll continue our broadcast here for another whatever it takes. Anyway, so that was great. The Fox News, all those producers did a marvelous job, because each show, like the Faulkner Focus and the, all the different teams of people, that had broadcast, shows, like America's Newsroom is from 9 to 11, and then, 11 to 12, you got the Faulkner Focus. And then you have another group that does the 12 to 1 show, and which I can't recite what they are, but you can Google it. But they did a marvelous job, giving you information, and storylines, while other, things are happening. So that was quite an event. And let's see if I have some, shrink that picture down a little bit. Yes, I do. I have, let's, yeah, here we go. Touch that picture right there. You see, hey, look at that. Is that a picture or what? Mrs. Trump standing by her husband. You see Vance in the background. His son is right, standing, towering over the back of the president. And there's Donald Jr. over in this corner. And Melania Trump right there. And this is, I think, Melania's father. It's 9:45. Remember, her mother passed away, so that's her surviving father. And he's taken the oath. And that's a picture. Well, he's not repeating after me. He's listening to Roberts. So this is before, this is right before he was sworn in. Everybody is, talking to people and this and that. And the first family is in their chairs right in the very front row. You see they're all empty because they're all standing up yakking. That's Carlson right there. If I recognize that. Yeah, he was all over the place. So there's the swearing in. And now he is sworn in. And then you can see his son over top of him, and Vance over to the left, and Ivanka over in the right side, Donald Jr. right there, and Trump leaned forward and looks Judge Roberts, Supreme Court Justice Roberts, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, installs the President of the United States. I mean, what an engagement of the way our Constitution, I still got right here. I have one of these for everybody that visits us in the apartment, or if we go on a dinner date with somebody, I'll put 3 of them in my back pocket, and 1 for each of our guests that have dinner with us. I hand out constitutions to everybody that we encounter, either visitors here, or if we go visit folks out in the wild. We just go to a restaurant, the 2 of us. I'll put a couple in my pocket anyway, because we may bump into somebody. So I keep handing them out. So there he's sworn in. Now he's sworn in, and and there's so there you see the former president and the now president, Trump, the 47th president, is shaking hands with the 46th president. This is right before they actually touched skin. And you can see Barron Trump, he's 6'9.5". He's a tall one. I mean, he is incredibly, he's a character. He's getting a little applause while he's standing up. This is a replay. And he puts his hand behind his ear like, I can't hear you. He's got a lot of character for a 19-year-old. But hanging around the Trump family, I'm sure you get a lot of training. The kid is great. But when he raises his arm and does the old fist pump thing, I mean, he's reaching up to 10 feet in the air. I mean, this kid is really big. Jeez. There you go. See, now this is right before they're going to shake hands. You see Biden he's watching his hand. And you see, look at that. Yeah. Couple of former presidents are watching on there. There's Donald Jr. There's President Clinton way over in this corner, looking on. And happy family. There's Ivanka. Who's like 35 or so. Donald Jr. maybe 37 or something. And here Barron is like 19, I believe. Now they're shaking hands with the onlooking family. I mean, it's quite a, there's only one of them in the United States every 4 years. So this is quite a, I think that's Trump's granddaughter right up there, looking right at her grandpa. So there's Trump giving his speech. And you can see all the people. There's probably 100 behind him and 700 in front of him. This is all behind, standing with Trump, facing the audience. There's probably 100 dignitaries, family and friends of the former president, and family and friends of the president that was just sworn in, the 47th president. There's the back of the head of the 46th president. And also standing in the middle is the 45th president. There's only two of them in the last 130 years where they didn't, if they were sworn in for 8 years of service, there's only two presidents in 250 years of our country that had someone serving in between the two terms instead of the terms being contiguous, touching. There's Chief Justice Roberts right there, you can see. There's a couple of senators, in the front row over there. And, everybody, these are all the gold tickets. These tickets are gold square tickets, But they originally forecasted 800 seats, or 600, and then they revised upward that they actually can put 800 people in this configuration. And, with the temperature being at like 12 degrees outside, with 20 mile an hour winds, that brings the wind chill factor down to, 6 degrees, single digits, with the wind in your face or in your back. It's like, all these people so many of these people are over 60. A lot of them are over 70. And you can't have them out, for an hour and 10 minutes. Well, the president gives a speech, and add to that, 20 minutes for the ceremonial stuff with the swearing in. And you have to have a half hour to load all the people into their seating, so they'd be out for a couple hours. Well, there's not enough clothing, it's not like these people are going to put a wetsuit, a foam wetsuit underneath their clothing so that they don't freeze. And you don't want half the audience passing out from hypothermia. Well, your body temperature drops, below a certain level. So they figured the hell with it. Just put it in a rotunda that has very good air conditioning. That'll keep the room at 72 degrees, so everyone is safe and sound. So it's safe and sound. Elsie Stefanik, I think, is being sworn in into her position. She may be like you, an ambassador. So I forgot that the vice president or the president can swear you in. So the president defers to the vice president for the swearing in of the president's cabinet, of which he's a cabinet member because he's vice president. Another interesting note, which you can read in the Constitution, is that the cabinet serves at the pleasure of the president. However, the vice president does not serve at the pleasure of the president. And that's the way it's written. He does not serve at the pleasure of the president. Which means if they have a kerfuffle and have a disagreement, and it comes to words, and it comes to, where they're not happy with each other, the president cannot say, "You're fired." No, there's no fired of the vice president, because he does not necessarily serve at the pleasure of the president. They may not like each other after 3 years. Hopefully they do. I think Vance is, enough of a politician. And if it wasn't for Trump, he wouldn't have been senator. And if it wasn't for Trump, he wouldn't be vice president. I had a sense that Marco Rubio and Vance were the last two, as they did a process of elimination on who would be Trump's vice presidential pick, while the campaign was underway. And I heard or read somewhere, that that Rubio was Trump's first pick. And J.D. Vance was, number two. But one of Trump's sons, I think Donald Jr., said, "Dad, you really ought to put Vance in as vice president and put Rubio in as Secretary of State." So that's how it is, and that's why you see Vice President Vance. I would have thought Rubio would have been a better vice president, because he knows the Senate. He's been in the Senate for 8 or 10 years. I think he's serving, the last 2 years of a 6-year term, right? Senators in 6-year, elected for 6-year terms. And he's been reelected at least once. So he's already served 4 years, and he already served a full term because he was reelected senator, and as the Florida senator from Miami-Dade County. He knows the operation, of the whole Capitol thing. He really knows it. So I guess they figured he would be best. Excuse me. Had a little cough and a sneeze. So when you're off in the State Department, you're kind of off on your own. You're not under the watchful eye of the president. And Rubio, he's a smart guy. He's been in Washington for at least 10 years that I can recall. And, he'd be probably better suited to manage a couple of 100,000 in the pyramid of people that lead up to the Secretary of State. Now, he has a bunch of, as the Secretary of State, in the pyramid, he's got 10 or 12 senior officials in the Secretary of State, Deputy Secretary of State, probably several deputies, if you're out of out of country, where you're, taking a break or whatever, then one of the deputy Secretary of States will be assigned to take over while Rubio is, on leave. But he's got his own as Secretary of State. I don't know if you know, he has his own jet airplane. That can hold 16 or 20 people. So when he flies over the world, he's got his own jet. Yeah, he's got several jets, I think. At least 2, maybe 3. As people, because remember, they have to serve all the, these offices, embassies, which they call it, Secretary of State office, in a foreign country, is called an embassy. And an embassy, serves, in, the capital or near the capital of a foreign country. And they handle, visas for people that want to travel to the United States. The Secretary of State's office, through their embassies, obtain visas so they can hop on an airplane, from that foreign country, into the United States. So, if you're in the embassy, in Madrid, if a fellow Madridian, a fellow Spaniard, wants to visit the United States, they go into the embassy of the U.S. Embassy, or their own embassy. You can do either. You can and obtain a visa, which is like a permit. So that permits you, that's why they call it a permit, a visa, so that you can travel and stay in the United States for a vacation purpose or a business purpose. You have to declare either, and it's usually for a period not to exceed 30 days. And then the visa expires, which means you need to fly back to Spain and tuck yourself back into the Spanish population. Visas are not, I guess there could be a permanent visa. If you married someone who's a U.S. citizen, I guess that changes your visa status. If a Spanish woman married an American man, that would not make her a U.S. citizen. So she would have to get a special waiver. I don't know what that would be called. They have a rule book for all these different scenarios that you can invent, But anyway, that's the partial purpose of a U.S. embassy that's, out of country. Well, the Secretary of State, he has to deal with all the embassies. They all report to him, and he reports to the president directly. And you got a dotted line to the vice president, Vance. But Marco Rubio then would sit in the cabinet and there's an assigned seat, and it's immediately to the right or the left of the president. The vice president sits on the other side, and the secretary of state sits on the other side. So the two closest people to the president, when they're sitting in, the cabinet room, and there is a room right next to the Oval Office. Called the cabinet room. And when you enter that cabinet room, it's it's not really a wide corridor, but if the Oval Office door is to your right, you immediately look to the left when you're standing right by the doorway, that's near the cabinet room, because it's like an adjoining office. So you can walk out of, the Oval Office and then walk right into the cabinet room. And there are 16 cabinet secretaries that are sworn in, that are confirmed by the Senate. Rubio just got confirmed. And maybe Stefanik. There's 2 or 3 that get, put in place today. And then 1 or 2 a day. John Barrasso, who is the Senate he's a senator, majority whip, He's like second in command to the Senate. Vance is the president of the Senate. And then on the right side, thinking right is the Republicans and left is the Democrats. So Barrasso, is the Senate Majority Whip. He is also in line to the succession of the president. It goes back. It's interesting. It goes back and forth. With the cabinet people. All the cabinet people are in line for the succession of the presidency. Yeah. So, you got president, you got vice president, who also happens to be president of the Senate. Then you go to the Speaker of the House. Then you go, I think, to the Senate Majority Whip. And then it goes over to the Secretary of State is next. And then it goes to the Secretary of Defense. And then it goes over, to the Secretary of Labor. I forget which. I don't remember what the succession is past that point. Anyway. But I think Marco Rubio is either third or fourth in line to the presidency. Heaven forbid we need to exercise that. So Elon Musk with the Doge, the Department of Optimization and Cost Cutting, is not, it's not a cabinet position. It doesn't require confirmation by the Senate. He's just a department, an office of the executive branch. And he has people in it that are put on different assignments. Elon will give them all, projects, get this and get that and put a report together, so, and they can deliver the report verbally to Elon, and then Elon can, with that information, then can go, maybe put together a list of, departments like there's a Secretary of Education. So there's lots of buildings full of people that deal with the Department of Education. And the way that Trump sees it right now, without further conversation from his cabinet, in the 47th presidency of the United States, and he sits in front of, his cabinet, and he sits with Vance, Vice President Vance, and they are going to decide, all right, what are we going to do with the Department of Education? Quickly he says, I think we should get rid of it because we're spending more money on the Department of Education and they're doing nothing but making our high school students stupider. We're like, of the 30 most industrialized countries on the world stage, out of 30, we're like 25th, on the bottom. We're in the bottom quadrille, the bottom quadrille, of all the industrialized nations. And we're spending more money per student than any of these other countries. What's wrong with that picture? And in Trump's mind, it's because the Department of Education is too damn strong. And they're trying to run education out of Washington. And the education of our Federal Republic of States should be conducted, at the state level. Let the state of Florida decide how these federal monies should be spent to their students in the state of Florida. Surely the Department of Education in Florida knows a hell of a lot more on how to allocate those funds, the federal funds that are available to the Florida Department of Education. So instead of putting $1,000, I'm being silly now, but let's say instead of $1 million going through the Washington Department of Education and all those salaries of all those people, and they're all arguing and deciding, how Florida should spend the money, that million shrinks to 750,000. So, and by the time it gets to Florida, it's 700,000. So 30% of all the federal money that ends up in the state gets burned up with the Department of Education in Washington. There's 7 major office buildings stuffed with Department of Education people. Let's bring that down to 60 people. 1 person assigned to each state, and 10 other, managerial types, that can report to the Secretary of Education. And just think of all the tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars that are being ground up in those 7 office buildings. We get rid of 6.5 of those office buildings, rent them out to other people. So instead of us paying the rent on the whole building, let's rent those to other people and let them pay the rent. And we'll save a lot of money renting 6 major K Street office buildings. So I mean that's top on the chopping block, if I hear everybody correctly. Excuse me while I sneeze. You certainly don't want to hear me blow my nose. That's what it sounds like. It's like a foghorn. From now on, I'm going to turn the volume off. So when I blow my nose and cough a little bit, we don't, overload the simulcast. Look what it says. Look at the ticker tape up on the top. Welcome to Jim Wilson's live simulcast broadcast across 3 social networks: Facebook Live, YouTube Live, and Twitter Live, also known as, look at that W up there. I've changed it to X, but for some reason or other it won't take it. It's on this little panel over here, it says X because I changed the W to an X. God knows why I put a W in there. WXYZ. Well, it's the letter, it's probably a typo. It's the letter next to X. On the keyboard, the W is up there and X is down there. So it's not exactly, a slip of one finger. Anyway, so it was an exciting day yesterday, and I hope large swaths of Americans watched. If you were not lucky enough, to be in the rotunda witnessing the swearing in of the 47th president. Imagine 47th in a 250-year period. So there's not a lot of them. And he was also the 45th, with Biden in between. And we found out what a disastrous mistake that was. It's funny. Well, just before Trump was being sworn in, like 15 minutes before, Biden's team put through 5 more family pardons. He pardoned himself prospectively, meaning against any future, indictments that may, Trump decided to indict him for something, like for corruption charges. He was corrupt because his son and himself used his influence to have foreign governments pay money for access to the president. Well, that's known as public corruption in the annals of the Department of Justice. That is pure and simple corruption. If the Chinese government were to pay were to pay Biden directly, handing him diamonds, handing him a check, mailing him a check, doing a wire transfer through a whole bunch of subsidiary companies, which is common for money laundering. Money launderers always have this complicated chain of, you have a limited partner over here, and the general partner of this partnership is a limited partnership of this other partnership, And the only owners of that partnership, are Biden and his family. And you go through 2 or 3 levels of that, and it makes it harder to track the money. And you open up bank accounts in different banks so that when that $1 million gets laundered, from the Chinese government into the personal pockets of Biden and his family, the money doesn't have to go directly to Biden. If it goes to anybody in his family, that's public corruption. You're not supposed to do that. If you get caught, you go to jail. If you get prosecuted. Biden's been caught, but no one's prosecuted him. And he could be prosecuted, by the Trump government. But Biden pardoned himself and his brother and 3 others in the family for receiving public corruption monies. So right before Trump got sworn in, and until Trump is sworn in, Biden is president, So right at that time, he snuck through 5 more pardons. He already pardoned 2,500 people, including his son. Of course, there are obvious charges of tax evasion, and when you receive $1 million from a foreign government, and you're the son of the president, you would likely not put it on your tax return that you file with the IRS. You keep those monies hidden from the IRS. Well, so you not only have public corruption, you have tax evasion. And Biden's son, pleaded guilty to certain tax evasion charges, in certain tax years. There were several other tax years that were beyond the statute of limitations. The limitations had run its course, and the Department of Justice intentionally let the statute of limitations run out. So that part, then Biden couldn't be prosecuted for tax evasion when it goes, beyond 7 years. So Elise Stefanik is delivering her opening statement to in the Senate hearing for her confirmation hearing. And the tagline underneath her name doesn't say the confirmation hearing of what. So the guy who's typing President's team, yeah, we get that. What is she being confirmed for? Well, she's giving her speech. And I have it turned off because I'm talking to you. Anyway, this is yesterday, wiggling over here on the left side of your screen. I've got some select pictures. Inauguration of Donald Trump. See the time? 12:10 Eastern Time. That means he's already president, because he was sworn in I mean, you could set your watch. When that thing said 12:00, Chief Justice Roberts got up and stood in front of Trump and basically looked at him and said, "All right, you get up. Yes, UN ambassador nominee." There we go. Or in the sidebar, elected to the House of Representatives in 2014. Served as the third ranking House Republican. Serves on the Armed Services Committee. She was the first Republican to back Trump's candidacy, for the 2024 political campaign. So, she'll be So I guess since she's being confirmed, I guess she sits on his cabinet. It seems like when the former UN ambassador, who serves at the pleasure of the president, so that person can be fired if they don't perform properly in the position and the roles that they get confirmed for. Everybody but the Vice President Vance. He is not subject to, "You're fired! Get out of here, clean out your desk. I'll have someone else clean out your desk. Just get out of here. Right now." Anyway, Nikki Haley was, one of the prior UN ambassadors, and he elevated that position to a cabinet level position. Now, I don't know whether that makes, the UN ambassador a permanent member, whether that position is permanently, a cabinet level position, or is just elevated for her. So the question is, does Stefanik, will she be a cabinet level position? And she would be one young lady to serve actually in the cabinet. Of course, she flies all over the place, because she's the UN, assuming the positive and she gets confirmed, which I'm sure she will, unless they find something really goofy in her background. But you see, when she's already serving in the House of Representatives, she's already gone through, all the exposure, to the FBI investigations. And when you go through the FBI checks, which the FBI does, for when you're joining the House of Representatives or the Senate, or the Supreme Court, the FBI does background checks. And they go back and they interview your parents, they interview any siblings you might have. They interview the neighbors of where you live. They interview neighbors of where you grew up, when you were 12 years old. They look at your school records. They look at your academic records. They make sure you really do have a degree from Union College or wherever you said you graduated from. But I've gone under such scrutiny. And you'd say, "Jimmy, why is that?" Well, because I served on the board of directors and as an executive member of a bank, and a state chartered Florida bank with a registered bank holding company. And to hold that high level position in a bank that's a member of the FDIC, you have to go through detailed FBI checks. The state of Florida did detailed background checks. The state of Florida orders the background checks from the FBI, and I've been investigated by 11 federal agencies. Literally 11. 9, 10, 11. To become an executive officer and serve on the board of a USA insured, trying to use the right vocabulary words here, to be, to serve on a domestic, federally insured, member of the FDIC. You got to go through 11 federal agencies background checks. Yeah. So if you misstated something about your resume, they reconstruct your resume from the background checks. They don't even look at your resume. They create their own by doing this detailed investigations. Yep. I was wondering, I remember having to go through all the... I was wondering, now why did I do that? Oh, yeah. You were the vice chairman of the board of the Registered Bank Holding Company. Yeah, that throws you into federal exam review. The FBI, oh yeah, the state of Florida, the Federal Reserve Bank, the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta, the Atlanta branch of the Federal Reserve. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, that's a distinct... If the background checks didn't come out right, the Federal Reserve or the state of Florida can prevent you from serving as the vice chairman of the board of a Federal Reserve, a federally insured bank. Yeah. When I turned in my stock and resigned from Southern Security Bank Corp. I asked my regulatory affairs person, Jerry Dillon, to check with the state of Florida to see am I held in high regard. I mean, I was a tough guy. I pushed the state of Florida and the Federal Reserve, as hard as possible, to operate the bank with what the regulators called, minimum levels of capitalization. Now, we never ran below, 6.5%, capital, so it's not like we were 1%. But I did, you're supposed to be at 7, and I went to 6 3/4 for 1 quarter, for 1 month, actually, of the entire 11-year period we had control of that bank. There was 1 month out of an 11-year history under our tutelage, as they say, where our capital level dropped below 7%. But we were right on the edge, 7, 7 1/4, 7 3/4. One time, when you do the audit on the, your monthly statements, the state of Florida said, you went below 7% this month, 10th month at the end of the year. Every other month, for 11 and a half years, we were over the minimum level of capitalization required by law. Yeah, there are laws about these things. Yeah. Went below 7% for 1 month. Because I got a $200,000 capital payment. We have an investor that funded $200,000, and he wrote a check, and it took an extra day. It took 2 days instead of 1 day to clear our bank. And it was deposited in the bank holding company, and then you transfer it to the capital of the bank. Well, that process took 2 days instead of 1 day, and for that 1 day, I went to 6 3/4% capital instead of 7. Yeah, because we would have been 710 instead of 680 or something like that. We were like 0.3 of a point, below what I thought it would be, which put us under 7 for 1 day. Jeez, they almost hung me by my neck. They came down on top of me. They were like watching. They were watching me, to see if I'd get it below 7. And they were watching it every single day. They had a guy in Tallahassee checking our capital ratio every morning. And he'd do the division and multiplication. And if it was 6, anything under 7, they would give us, they'd strap me to the pole and whip me. Wow. Well, it was only 1 month out of 11 and a half years. Yeah. Anyway. If I had it all over again, I wouldn't have resigned the time I resigned from Southern Security. Because one of the partners, our bank was acquired by a bigger bank, and that's how it is. The big banks, acquire the little banks, and it's like the big fish eats the little fish. Yeah. Well, Hal, H-A-L, Connell, with a C, C-O-N-N-E-L-L, something like that. Who I didn't know that well, because he was the guy putting the deal together. And, I just wanted to make sure our shareholders were taken care of in that merger. I didn't want them scalped, Anyway, so it turns out that Hal Cannell, after I got to know him, and I got to know him a lot better, after I said I was going to resign, I should have kept my mouth shut until I, spent more time in Hal Cannell's office in Miami, Coral Gables. And I spent some time with Hal, and it turns out I really liked the guy. And if I had it all over again, I would not have resigned, because he was a very exciting, interesting, intuitive, ingenuity. He could really engineer some M&A, mergers and acquisitions. And I was pretty much, I was on spot on how to do M&A. And I should have stayed and worked with him for a couple of years instead of giving up the show. Because, I would have had $150,000, $60,000 or $70,000 salary for 2 or 3 more years at the worst. And spent a lot of time with Hal Cannell in Coral Gables, which I turned out I really liked the guy. Yeah, but I ducked out, and early I figured the first money out would be the best, and I didn't want to compete with my partner Phil Motter, because I was the younger guy, and I figured, well, if I ducked out, that would make Phil Motter a more important person and they would keep him. And they did, but they tortured him. They did everything to get him to resign, and he just wouldn't. And they didn't want to fire him because he controlled too many investors, because he brought in a lot of money into I brought in about a third of the money, and he brought, 30%, and Phil Motter brought in about 70% of the money. But, that was his job, to bring in the money, and my job was to find and acquire the bank. And that's what I did. I found this bank in Hollywood, Florida. Our offices were in Boca, but the closest in geography to Boca Raton, to buy a bank was Florida First International Bank of Hollywood on Sheridan Street, west of I-95, about a mile or so, on the north side of Sheridan Street. 3700 block, I believe, of Sheridan Street. There's a right-hand turn right into and there's a beautiful banking office. And I remember when Phil and I were talking, among each other, privately in our private offices, in Deerfield. One of our shareholders suggested, why don't you rent? I have a building. And of course, you scratch my back, I scratch your back. So since he was our first investor, and then he mentioned, how about, I have an upstairs office in this building that's right on, Hollywood, no, it was, trying to think of I forget the address. So we said yes, and it was like a 20 by 20 room, on the second floor. Second floor, you walk up the steps. I don't think they had an elevator. Yeah, I don't think so. Anyway, maybe it did. I don't know. I don't think it wasn't a fancy office building. It was like a 2-story deal, and you have a tenant downstairs and a tenant upstairs. Sometimes they split the room in half, and you got 2 tenants downstairs and 1 tenant upstairs. Whatever. So we took the whole room, and Phil sat on one side of the room, and I sat on the other side of the room. And we had desks, which were downstairs, our own separate computer things, and we had the Wi-Fi was serviced by the building, Anyway, so it was easy for us to get in there without almost any tenant improvement work. And, for the Butler family, Tim Butler, I think, owned the building. Yeah. There's an exit off I-95, just west of the Federal Highway. Anyway, so I found a bank. So anyway, so I'm meeting in this one-room schoolhouse, kind of a setting, and we're upstairs in this office building owned by Tim Butler, and I'm looking at Phil's. I'm working with him for 3 or 4 months. I was new to Boca Raton because I just moved here like 3 years ago from Tampa. So all my money friends were in Tampa. And that's too far away to do an investment, in Boca Raton. So I did other kinds of things. I met with Phil with potential investors. I put a nice package together so Phil would have a nice package to hand out to prospective investors. Put together, what was a private placement memorandum with exhibits and so forth. Had a lawyer look it over. And, Phil had a tough time getting the people that he knew to write a check to invest in Southern Security Bancorp. B-A-N-C-O-R-P. It wasn't a K because that's bank. And you're not allowed to have bank in your name according to Federal Reserve policy unless you actually own a bank. So that's why when you see a Bancorp where it's a B-A-N-C-O-R-P, it's a soft C. Because you're not allowed to have bank in the name. Can't be hyphenated, can't be spelled in there. You can't have a dot between the, When you actually own a bank, which is subject to Federal Reserve approval, then you're allowed to have, you can substitute, you can throw a K in between there and make it Bank Corp. But, by the time you do that, what's the point? So most companies don't go back and change their corporate name. It's too much of a hassle with all the regulatory crap you got to do just a simple change of the name by throwing a K in there because now you own a bank. Yeah. So anyway, I said, Phil, we're doing this a little out of order. I said, you know what I need to do for you? Is I want to make your job easier. Since you're raising the money, I'm going to go out and find a bank and get it under contract, get it under definitive agreement. I've had a little experience with that. And because of my days at Rural Trust, I was on the bank acquisition team. So I was around the edges of our lawyers at Rural Trust, so I could see how they put together bank acquisitions. Because they were, at Rural Trust, we were buying a lot of banks. We bought like 34 of them in the state of Florida, and I was lucky enough to be put on the bank acquisition team. Oh yeah, wow, did I like that assignment. I was still, schlepping real estate or commercial loans, in the Rural Trust. But, I was part-time on the acquisition team. And once or twice a year, I'd have to go on the team and go, investigate a bank and go through their financials and go through their portfolio. So my job was to go through a big piece, of the bank's real estate portfolio. And Charlie O'Mara, he would look at the commercial loan portfolio. And, so that's basically a majority of the bank's assets. And then we had treasury people that would look at their investment portfolio and, immediately liquidable securities, like deposits, certificates of deposit, other treasury bills that are immediately liquidable, at par, at the worst. Anyway, so there were 6 members of the bank acquisition team. I handled the real estate side. Charlie O'Mara handled the commercial loan side. Jill Thagard handled the treasury side of the bank, the target bank we were looking at. So the first thing you had to do, which I learned at Rural Trust, is you have to meet with, the CFO of a bank is not going to just let you in to, look at their customer base and look at their loan portfolio and look at the deposits and look at the securities and, and look at the commercial. they're not going to let you in there unless there's a reason to let you snoop around these private files of a commercial bank. So you get it under contract. You meet with the CEO, and meet with the president of the bank, if they're separate people. Usually in a smaller bank, the CEO and the president is the same person. Yeah. Anyway, so I would, go through, I went to the state of Florida, went to the FDIC, and looked up some banks. They issue reports to the public if you ask for them, on the capital ratios of banks. So I look at bank capital ratios, and the Southern Security Bank, the Florida First International Bank of Hollywood. Can you imagine? It sounds like a huge institution. It was, it took 2 floors in a 3-story building, and the top floor was like storage and a couple of conference rooms or meeting rooms, and downstairs was the entire branch with the office of the CEO president. Anyway, so I met with that fella. I forget his name, and because it was like 30 years ago. Met a lot of people. So I met with the president of the bank, and then I met with the chairman of the board of the bank, 2 separate people, and I convinced them that we were going to buy the bank, and that Jim Wilson and Phil Motter are respected bank officials, known in the state of Florida, known in Tallahassee, known, in Atlanta, Georgia, the Federal Reserve, 6th district, 6th. You ever see the money currency? If you see a $10 bill with the Federal Reserve District number 6, that main office there was in, in Atlanta. Federal Reserve, District 10, I think, is, like California or Southern California. District 5 is like Kansas City. I forget all the numbers, but anyway, we were known generally in the banking business, in the in the regulatory world, and so I went through. I issued, a definitive agreement, which could be written by anybody. So I used the Royal Trust, definitive agreements as a model for me to create, the definitive agreement. Since I served on that team, I had, sample documentation of banks that we were looking at, when I was at Royal Trust. Those banks were consummated and all that. So those agreements were just old documents. So I had several in my briefcase, and I created, literally on, in WordPerfect, I think, was the software package, and created a definitive agreement written to, the executive officers and directors of Florida First International Bank of Hollywood, a state-chartered bank. There was no holding company, so we just buy behind the bank directly. So I put together all these provisions and things, and it was in form that was acceptable to, I guess the CEO, chairman, and several other board of director members of the Florida First International Bank of Hollywood. So I got them to sign it, and once they signed it, then I would sign it. So I gave a copy of that to Phil Motter, because I had gotten the CEO from that bank to accept, the definitive agreement. And I took a picture of the bank, the inside of the branch, and I took a picture standing, in the parking lot of the branch, looking, up so you could see the whole face of the building. It's a very attractive building, in a good side of the street. Nice highway access. Sheridan Street is a major road that goes east-west through the whole middle of the town of Hollywood. I used to teach high school math, in Hollywood, Florida, a long time ago. So I said, now, Phil, you got something to sell. Because in your bag of tricks, when you finally get an investor interested in what you're talking about, you can whip out a picture of the bank and whip out a picture of the branch. That's what investors know. Pictures. And look how, and I took a beautiful picture of the bank. Nice blue sky, and I'm a digital photography guy, so I knew how to make it look good. And it was a pretty branch. And I took a picture of it when it wasn't full of a lot of cars in the driveway, so you could see, the steps that walk up to the branch and everything. It was really very well done. Travertine marble all over the place. And nice big vault door. Yeah, it was good. I liked it. And we had the definitive agreement, which was signed by their CEO, which, and I was prepared to sign it. I may have signed it, but not given the bank a copy of it yet. Let's try and emphasize for a few of our potential board members and see if they are going to bite. I said, this, Phil, gives you a full picture of, and he started raising money like crazy. And he was a good talker. And he knew these people because they were investors in the prior bank that he was president of. And we ended up getting, a lot of money raised. I raised some money from the people that I was working with, major, people with big cash deposits and people that I knew at the Boca Bank, because I had previously served as a senior lending officer for the Boca Bank, a state chartered bank. So, the people in the state of Florida knew who I was, because I was, senior lending officer of that bank. And before they could hire me, I had to go through the state of Florida to get permission. So they review your resume and check you out, to see if you're a bad guy in banking. They don't want a scallywag in there making loans like right. So they want to make sure you knew what the hell you were doing. And I had a good resume, a really solid resume in banking. So that's what we did. And I remember the last $9,000 or $10,000 we had to raise $1 million. That was the agreement we had with the state of Florida. That was the agreement that we made with the Federal Reserve, that when we acquire this bank, we will invest no less than $1 million into the capital and surplus of Southern Security. And when we closed, that's exactly what we did. I had $1 million check in my pocket. And we'd signed all the papers upstairs, in the office building. And then I was downstairs dealing with the FDIC, because they're getting ready to shut the bank down. Literally seize the bank. So we bought the bank on Thursday, and the FDIC was going to take the bank over on Friday. So, and I looked over at the lady that was the head. They were measuring desks, for God's sakes. To write it up in their acquisition plan or seizure plan or whatever you call it. I never worked on the regulatory side, so I don't know what they call a bank just before it's seized. It's on the S list, if you know what I mean. You don't want to be on the 4-letter word beginning with S. It doesn't smell good. When you're on the S list of the regulators, your days are counted. So you either get yourself bought by somebody or we're going to take it. That's basically what the regulators tell the directors of the target bank. Anyway, so they were already on the S list of the regulators, and we had raised money knowing we were going to buy that bank, and we did our closing to make sure that the FDIC wouldn't grab it first. So I made friends with the lady that was in charge of taking over the bank, and I introduced myself as the person that's going to make sure that you don't get to take over the bank. She said, well, according to what I've been told, unless $1 million shows up, by Friday morning, we are going to grab it. I said, yeah, I think I know that. I think he told me that Monday. So this is like a Wednesday when I was talking to her. So she had one of these briefcases, that has, that does this. You open it up this way. And I said, show me the sticker. So she opened up her briefcase like that a little bit, and she said, look down there. You can kind of see. I can't pull it out and show it to you because I'm not allowed to pull it out of my briefcase until I'm actually going to stick it to the front glass door. And I've been instructed by the state of Florida that if you certify for me and show me the general ledger ticket where $1 million is in the capital of the bank by Thursday night, Friday morning we take control of the bank. And all that's been approved up our chain of command. I said, okay, well, you can tell your folks that in this pocket, in my white shirt, I had a pocket right there. And I said, I whipped out there, I opened up, I said, see that check for $1 million? It goes in the business of the bank tomorrow, which is Thursday. I was talking to her on Wednesday. Yep. So she gave me a peek at the paper. I said, all right, Phil, we gotta write this $1 million check, So she saw my check. I said, so, it's Thursday afternoon at 3 or 4 o'clock. I can tell you can go home because this check is going in the business of the bank on Thursday. So Thursday evening, it'll be in the deposits of the bank. And this is a cashier's check for $1 million. So we had $990,000, and I needed 10 more thousand so that I could go to First Union and write that and create a cashier's check for $1 million. But I need 9,000 more. So we're looking at each other. Where are we going to get $9K? I said, well, let me ask my attorney friend who closed all our loans at Boca Bank if he can write a check for $9,000. So I met with him. I made an appointment to meet with him on Wednesday afternoon. Met with him Wednesday evening. He's working late. I show up at like 7 o'clock. Hey, Larry, how you doing? After that, we had a little small talk. He said, all right, Jimmy, what are you doing here? I said, Larry, I need a $9,000 investment check from you so you can buy a few shares of stock in Southern Security Bank Corp. Because we're going to buy a bank on Thursday, and I need $10,000 more, or else I can't write my $1 million cashier's check. Oh, Jimmy, I'm so this, I'm so that, and he's crying the blues. He calls out to his girl who does all the books, at Marchbanks' law firm. His name is Larry Marchbanks. I played golf with him all the time. He's a good friend. I closed all our loans at Boca Bank. Did a good job closing the loans. Good lawyer. A good bank. Good man to close real estate loans. He knew how to document things properly. Anyway, so he said, hey, do we have any? Calls out to his treasurer. He says, don't we have $30,000 into our TTL account that we have to pay into next quarter? She said, yeah, we got $31,000. I said, all right, I'm going to take 10 of that and invest it with Jimmy's bank. So move 10 of that over to our operating account so I can write Jimmy a check. He said, I'm taking that out of my TTL deposit. This month I've got to put that 10 back so I can pay my payroll taxes. He said, but this is like the beginning of the month, so I'll have plenty of time to reimburse that out of, legal fees and stuff. So go ahead and take this $10,000 check. He says, you scoundrel. I'm a little skinny on money right now. So he gave me the last $10K that we needed so that I could write $1 million check to buy this bank. Because $990,000 is not what the Federal Reserve, is not what we promised them. And I had done with Jerry Dolan, and she and I talked. And she told me, she said, $1 million that you're going to get away with, you got to make $1 million deposit. That's just, you've done all the numbers. It brings it up over the capital requirements, and then you have to put more money in a little later, but at least this way you can do the acquisition. And she got approval from the state of Florida. They said, all right. Federal Reserve said, all right. It was less money than they want more. They want as much money as possible. If you said $5 million, they'd say, okay. We got them down to $1 million. I mean, we didn't start the 5 and whittle them down. We just came up with $1 million, as a promise. So in all our documentation, we had to put $1 million in that bank, before the FDIC took control of it. And they told me when they were going to do that. So we had all the money we needed. Thank God. So I had $1 million cashier's check. And I said, Bill, I said, I'm not mailing it. I'm not doing it by courier. I'm going to staple this sucker to my pocket. With it folded on the inside of my pocket. Then I'm going to staple it so it can't fall out of my pocket. And I'm going down to Southern Security and making that deposit on Wednesday because I don't want to worry about Friday or Thursday. So Thursday morning, I gave the cashier of Florida First International Bank of Hollywood $1 million check, as my requirement under the definitive agreement. In that definitive agreement, it's in other words, it's a contract. So instead of a contract to buy real estate, it was a contract to buy controlling interest in a state chartered bank. And you got all this, these regulatory requirements, and you got to hedge here and hedge that. But in there was embodied the language where I had to put in $1 million. Or we had to, bank holding company, our bank holding company, BANC Corp. So that's what we did. So I put the money in Thursday, and we closed on the contract on Friday. Yep. That afternoon, we had the closing documentation that was put together by I don't remember who the lawyer was on our side closing the deal. It may have been Larry. He was a good contract lawyer, transaction lawyer. So President Trump, our new President Trump, and Melania, and the Vice President and his wife are at the National Prayer Service this morning at 9:12, or at 11:12 a.m. Eastern Time. So Melania doesn't have the hat on. Hardly recognize her without the hat. Yeah. She's a very serious looking woman. And they're all tired because they've been running around all day yesterday until after 1 a.m. They went to the 3 inaugural balls. They had to dance around and, be happy face until like 1:30 in the morning. So they were able to ride back to the White House. Yeah, because they moved into the White House. In a 5-hour period, the Bidens had to move out of the White House and the Trumps move into the White House. So you had, trucks of boxes. And that's what they do, Moved his stuff out and moved their stuff in. The GSA does a lot of this moving and packing. The General Services Administration, GSA. They actually go, they don't hire a moving company. It's the GSA that does that for the outgoing president and for the incoming president. The GSA will pack you and box you and move you to Washington and then unpack you into the White House. They have all kinds of procedures and things that you have to follow. Here's Trump giving a speech as president. Of course, all these timestamps.
It's 11:15.
See, January 20th at 1:12 or 12:11 p.m. See that? That's right out of the exif data of the picture. Yep. He's giving this, see, 10:12 Mountain Time. There's Marilyn and I with that. Hold on a second. I think after the you're calling Marilyn as senior branch manager of this financial institution. You think after the 5th ring on the personal cell phone, you'd just hang it up. Press 9 and let it get the messages instead of letting it ring. Anyway, you can see there, I took a picture. I'm on a couch in Boca Raton on the 8th floor at Doral Palm Place. And I had Marilyn found a nice bottle of Veuve Gigot champagne. $100 bottle of champagne, Marilyn got for $50. What a deal. And you see the champagne glass there. And I've got the Flying Eagle etched into that crystal, genuine crystal wine glasses given to us by Mr. and Mrs. James F. Lindgren, good friend of mine, that passed away in a car accident in, I think, North Carolina. Well, I think he delivered a daughter to college, and he was driving back to, after they dropped off the college freshmen or whatever. And they got hit by a propane truck, of all things. On a 2-lane road in North Carolina. It was a rainy morning, and anyway, he gave us these wine glasses as a housewarming gift, or I don't know, just a Christmas maybe. But it was like 4 crystal glasses in a presentation box. He's the guy that got me the job at Royal Trust Bank, introduced me to Bob Curtis. I met with him, and Bob said, "Yep, I want this kid." So I got hired in as a senior real estate guy, as a vice president. As a VP of the bank, you're a senior officer of the bank. You're not an executive officer of the bank, you're a senior officer. And then you can become senior vice president, which then you're even more senior. Yeah. Anyway, here you go. We're sipping champagne during, Trump is being sworn in. I, Donald John Trump, promise. Yep. So there's a live picture on Capitol Hill. And the time on our TV was 12 p.m. He was sworn in at 12. By 12:02, he was shaking hands. Congratulations, Mr. President. The Chief Justice of the Supreme Court says to Donald John Trump, while 8 of the other judicial members of the Supreme Court were watching on with the rest of the senior people in the audience. Yeah. Well, here's the other 4 or 5 family members that were brother and a sister and someone else. 5 family members were given pardons yesterday, immediately before Trump was sworn into office, because at 12 o'clock he could no longer write a pardon for anybody because he wouldn't be president anymore. As soon as the new one is sworn in, the old one is out simultaneously. Anyway, there's Trump. He is sworn in, getting ready to give a speech. Yeah, at the podium. He is now President not president-elect. So Marilyn put a little cheese plate, little salamis, olives, some kind of stuff she puts on Gregor's, sipping champagne. So now Trump is getting ready for in the Capital One Arena for the inaugural parade. Little parade around, is parading around the middle of the that's at 5 p.m. Is in there. He's dancing. He got those arms a swaying. Melania's looking on laughing. And a smile on her face. It's a long, hard fight. There's the dignitaries. There's the son. There's the granddaughter up there. This is the 20-year-old son, 19-year-old son that just started NYU business school. Yep. Donald Jr. is right there. So he's applauding the people that are, in the inaugural parade. So since it was 7 degrees outside, they had the inaugural parade inside this Capital One Arena, which is a big arena that seats 20,000, and it was a sold-out crowd. You had to get tickets to this thing. Look at the size of that kid. Donald John Trump is 6'4", and the son is like 6'9.5". He's over 6'9". Yep. So he stands head and shoulders over pretty much everybody. And here, soon, President Trump will give a speech at the inaugural parade. Yep. There he's getting ready. Soon. Here's everybody getting ready to take pictures of Trump while he's going to speak. And he's speaking before to speak. And she's got a happy face on with that prestigious looking hat. Anyway, so at 7:30 p.m. I was done taking pictures on January 21. Now here we are, January 21. Yeah, that's today. That's now. And it's 11:24, and I've been yakking away here for 2 hours and 15 minutes, according to this watch, which you can't see right now. I'm going to turn the music up to full amplitude, and I'm going to stop talking for 30 seconds while we end this broadcast, and we'll see you tomorrow around the same time, 9 o'clock, 9 to 11. Then I got to get ready for our cleaning ladies to come through here. And they come through like locusts through Oklahoma. Yep. Have a great day. Now that we got the politics almost out of our system. Watch one more night of it tonight. Well, they swear in some of his cabinet officials that require confirmation by the Senate. The Senate has sworn in Rubio. We'll see if there's any more swearing-ins today. Have a great day. Bye-bye.